Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. I always thought I had the perfect marriage. Grace and I had been together for 10 years, married for 8, and in all that time, she had been my best friend, my partner in crime, my everything. We shared dreams, laughs, and even our struggles. I never doubted her love for me. One afternoon, she received an envelope in the mail that immediately caught her attention. "Ben, can you believe it?" she said, waving the envelope around as if it were a winning lottery ticket. 15 years since college. It's going to be so much fun to see everyone again. I smiled at her excitement. Grace was always the social butterfly in our relationship, and it was one of the things I loved about her. "We should go together," she said, her eyes lighting up. "It'll be fun, and I'd love for you to meet some of my old friends." I hesitated for a moment. Social events weren't really my thing, but her enthusiasm was contagious. "Sure," I said. "Count me in." Her face broke into a grin and she kissed my cheek. "You're the best, Ben. It's going to be amazing, you'll see." The night of the reunion, she was glowing. She wore a sleek black dress that hugged her in all the right places. Her hair was styled, makeup flawless. She looked beautiful, radiant even. "You look stunning, Mrs. Harper," I said, pulling her in for a kiss. "And you don't look too bad yourself," she replied with a grin. The venue was a swanky hotel ballroom, the kind that screamed wealth and nostalgia. The place was packed with people who were already tipsy and reminiscing loudly. Grace introduced me to some of her old friends, most of whom were friendly enough, though a few gave me the once-over as if trying to figure out how I'd landed her. Then he appeared. "Jason?" Grace said, her voice high-pitched and breathy, a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. I turned to see a tall, athletic-looking guy with perfectly tousled hair and a jawline that could cut glass. He was the kind of guy who knew he was good-looking and didn't bother hiding it. "Grace, wow, you look amazing," Jason said, his eyes lighting up as he hugged her. "This is my husband, Ben," Grace said, gesturing to me, though her tone seemed slightly off, almost nervous. "Ben, nice to meet you," Jason said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, his smile charming. "Nice to meet you too," I said, though something about him immediately rubbed me the wrong way. As the evening wore on, Grace and Jason seemed to drift toward each other, caught in their own little bubble. She laughed a little too much at his jokes, touched his arm a little too often. I caught her looking at him. She wasn't just glancing at him. Her gaze lingered as if she were seeing someone she hadn't quite forgotten. It gnawed at me, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. When we were alone for a moment, I leaned in and asked, "So, what's the story with Jason?" She blinked, her smile faltering just for a second before she waved it off. "Oh, Jason? We were just friends in college, that's all." "Just friends?" I pressed, watching her face closely. She nodded quickly, her tone light but forced. "Yeah, Ben, just friends. Don't read too much into it." I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. After all, I trusted her, but something about the way they interacted lingered in my mind, nagging at the edges of my thoughts. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself I was just overthinking. Grace was my wife, my best friend. There was no reason to doubt her. The day after the reunion, I started noticing subtle changes in Grace. It was like a switch had flipped overnight. She was on her phone more often, her face lighting up with smiles at texts she wouldn't share with me. She seemed distracted, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. The next morning, over coffee, I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just the excitement of reconnecting with old friends, I told myself. "You seem chipper this morning," I said with a smile. "Oh, do I?" she replied, almost absent-mindedly, her eyes flicking to her phone again. She also started going out almost every day. "A few of my friends are staying in town for a bit longer," she said casually that evening. "We're just grabbing drinks and catching up. It's only for a week." It sounded reasonable enough. I mean, she hadn't seen these people in years. Of course, she'd want to make the most of it. Still, I couldn't ignore how vague her plans were. "Who are you meeting?" I asked one evening as she grabbed her purse. "Just a couple of the girls from college," she said, already halfway out the door. "I'll be back before too late." But as the week went on, her outings stretched later and later into the night. When I asked about it, she always had an excuse. There was just one more drink, the conversation ran long, or she lost track of time. Around that time, she also started avoiding intimacy with me. When I reached for her in bed, she'd pull away gently, mumbling, "I'm tired," or "I have a headache." At first, I thought she might really be exhausted from her busy week, but the excuses became constant. She always seemed distant, her mind elsewhere. One night, she came home late again. I was sitting on the couch pretending to read when she walked through the door. "Hey," I said, glancing up. "Hey," she replied, kicking off her shoes. "Sorry I'm late, we lost track of time." As she passed by me, I caught a whiff of her. It wasn't her usual perfume. No, this was something else. A distinctly masculine cologne. My chest tightened, suspicion clawing its way to the surface. Then I noticed something else. A faint red mark near her collarbone, barely visible above the neckline of her blouse. "What's that?" I asked, gesturing toward it. She glanced down quickly, her hand flying to her neck. "Oh, this? It's nothing. I must have scratched myself or something," she said, her voice a little too casual, a little too quick. Her explanation didn't sit right with me. A scratch? It didn't look like a scratch. It looked like a bruise. Something intimate. Something that shouldn't be there. The suspicion that had been gnawing at me grew sharper, more defined. Something was definitely wrong. The next evening, she was getting ready to go out again. As she showered, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it, hesitant at first, but then my curiosity got the better of me. The message was from Jason. "Last night was incredible. I can't wait to see you tonight." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My hands trembled as I set the phone back down, my mind racing. I stared at the bathroom door, listening to the sound of the water running. A part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, but something stopped me. I needed to know for sure. When Grace came out of the shower, I forced myself to act normal. I smiled as if nothing had happened. "Who are you going out with tonight?" I asked casually as she got dressed. "Just my friends from college," she said without hesitation. "You know, the usual crew, all girls. We're just heading to a bar for drinks." I nodded, keeping my tone light. "Okay, babe, have fun." She smiled back at me, completely unaware of what I knew. Once she left the house, I waited a few minutes before grabbing my jacket and keys. My heart was pounding as I got into my car and followed her, keeping my distance. I had to know the truth. Grace drove across town before pulling into a small, dimly lit cafe on a quiet street. She stopped her car and waited. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I parked a few spaces away, watching her intently. A couple of minutes later, Jason appeared, stepping out of the cafe. He walked over to her car, opened the passenger side door and got in. And then, she kissed him. It wasn't just a friendly peck either. It was deep, passionate, and unmistakable. My vision blurred with fury. My worst fears had just been confirmed in that fleeting, gut-wrenching moment. The moment Jason slid into the car, Grace started the engine without hesitation, and they drove off together. I followed, my mind racing with a mix of fury and disbelief. They pulled into a hotel parking lot a short while later. I stayed far enough back to avoid being noticed, but close enough to see them get out of the car. They were laughing, hugging, touching each other in ways that made my stomach churn. Grace looked at him like she hadn't looked at me in months. They went inside together, heading toward the elevators. I waited until they disappeared from view before getting out of my car. Inside the hotel lobby, I approached the reception desk, still seething but trying to keep my composure. "Excuse me," I said to the young man behind the counter. "Did you see a man and a woman come in here about a minute or two ago? He's tall, dark hair, clean-shaven. She's blonde, about this tall." I gestured with my hand. The receptionist frowned thoughtfully. "Yes, I did. That would be Mr. Jason. He's staying here. I'm not sure about the woman's name, but she's been here the last 3 nights, in Mr. Jason's room." His words hit me like a brick to the chest. 3 nights? "That's my wife," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "The woman is my wife." The receptionist looked alarmed. "Sir, I'm sorry. I need your help," I interrupted, leaning closer. "Please, I need to get into that room." He hesitated, glancing around nervously. "Sir, I can't just—" "I'm begging you," I said, desperation clear in my voice. "I want to see her face when she realizes I'm there. Just help me, and I'll handle the rest." The receptionist seemed torn, but after a moment he gave a small nod. "Okay," he said quietly. But you didn't hear this from me. He picked up the phone and dialed an internal number. Hi, can you send a bottle of champagne to Mr. Jason's room as a complimentary gift? Yes, room 413, thank you. He hung up and turned back to me. I'll have one of our staff deliver it. When the server leaves, they'll make sure the door is slightly ajar. You'll have to be quick. Thank you, I said, my voice heavy with both gratitude and rage. A few minutes later, I watched from a corner of the lobby as a hotel staff member carried a tray with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses to the elevator. I followed discreetly, my heart pounding harder with every step. When the server knocked on the door, I waited at a distance. I heard muffled voices as the door opened. The server handed over the tray, thanked them, and turned to leave. Just as planned, the door didn't latch properly. It appeared closed but wasn't fully shut. I took a deep breath, my fists clenched, and walked toward the room. I pushed the door open just enough to step inside. What I saw made my blood boil. Grace and Jason were on the bed, half naked, tangled together in a moment of intimacy, completely oblivious to my presence. "What the hell is this?" I roared, stepping fully into the room. Grace's head snapped up, her face going pale as she saw me. "Ben, what are you doing here?" Jason froze, his expression quickly shifting from surprise to something bordering on defiance. "You lied to me, Grace," I said, my voice trembling with fury. "You said you were out with a couple of girls from college, and this is what you've been doing?" "Ben, please, let me explain," she stammered, scrambling to cover herself with the sheets. "There's nothing to explain," I spat. "I saw the texts, I saw everything. You've been sneaking around with him for days." Jason tried to interject. "Hey man, maybe we should—" "Don't," I snapped, cutting him off. "Don't say a damn word." Grace looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Ben. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't know how to tell you." "Didn't know how to tell me what?" I shouted. "That you've been cheating on me? That everything we built together meant nothing to you?" The room was heavy with tension, the air thick with betrayal. And in that moment, as Grace sobbed and Jason sat there silently, I realized that our marriage, our life together, had been shattered beyond repair. I turned away, my heart pounding in my chest, as the weight of everything crashing down hit me like a physical blow. I didn't want to stay in that room with them, with the sound of Grace's sobs hanging in the air. Without a word, I walked out, my steps heavy, each one like a beat in a funeral march. Grace, now fully dressed, scrambled to her feet, and in a frantic rush, she ran after me. "Ben, please, wait!" Her voice was shaking with desperation. I kept walking, my jaw clenched, but I could hear her footsteps closing in behind me. "I'm sorry," she pleaded, reaching for my arm. "Please, just let me explain." Her voice cracked, the remorse clear in her tone, but it did nothing to soften the pain gnawing at my insides. I turned to face her, fury and betrayal rising in my chest. "Explain what, Grace? How you let this happen? How could you do this to me, to us?" She flinched at my words, but then took a breath and said, "Jason, he was more than just a friend. He was my boyfriend in college. I never told you because it didn't matter. But when I saw him again at the reunion, I don't know, Ben, I felt something again. I thought I could control it, but I couldn't." "You didn't just feel something. You slept with him, Grace. You threw away everything we had for, what, a moment of nostalgia?" My voice broke with the last words, the disbelief still fresh in my throat. Grace's face crumpled. "I never meant for it to happen like this. I love you, Ben. Please don't let this destroy everything." I shook my head, stepping back. "I can't look at you the same way anymore. I thought I knew you, but this is something I can't come back from." Tears welled in her eyes, and she reached out for me again, her voice pleading. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted to lose you. I love you, Ben. Please don't walk away from us." I could feel my anger simmering beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by the hurt, the deep betrayal that clawed at me. "You already lost me, Grace. I can't forgive this." Her eyes widened in panic. No, please don't say that. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. I'm done. I'm filing for divorce," I said, cutting her off. The words felt like a finality. The last bridge burned. Grace shook her head violently. "No, Ben, please. I love you. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was just a mistake, a stupid mistake. Please don't leave me." I stood there, the weight of her pleas pressing down on me. But the truth was, I couldn't stay with someone who had betrayed me so completely. "It's over, Grace. I can't trust you anymore. I won't live in a marriage built on lies." Her face twisted in anguish. "You can't do this, Ben. You can't just walk away from everything we've built. If you divorce me, I'll take everything. Do you hear me? Everything." Her voice grew sharp, wild, and I saw the desperation, the fear in her eyes. She was losing control, and I could see how far she was willing to go to keep everything she had. I paused, my mind racing. "You want everything?" I asked, my voice cold. "Sure. We'll see about that," I said, the irony heavy in my voice. Without waiting for her to respond, I turned and walked up to the reception. I paid for the champagne, tipped the receptionist for his help, and then walked out of the hotel. I couldn't believe it. My own wife was trying to take everything from me as revenge for the divorce. But she hadn't considered one thing. I wasn't just going to sit back and do nothing. I got into my car, heart heavy with the weight of betrayal, and called a locksmith. "Hi, man. What's up?" I said, my voice steady but tense. "I need you to come by my house as soon as you can. I want to have all the locks changed." I didn't want Grace to have any way back into our home. She had taken everything she could from me emotionally, and I wasn't about to let her take anything else. I didn't care if she had nowhere to sleep. She could go back to Jason, I guess. The locksmith arrived quickly and did his job. Afterward, I grabbed a few of my things. I didn't want to stay there for even a minute longer. The house that had once been filled with warmth now felt cold and foreign, haunted by the echoes of betrayal. I drove to a hotel and checked in. Once in the room, I did the only thing I could think of to protect myself, protect what little was left of me. I transferred every last penny from our shared bank accounts into my own, making sure she wouldn't get a dime. But I didn't stop there. The next day, I donated every single asset we had accumulated over the years, except our house, to charity. When the divorce papers finally came through, it was over. The lawyers handled everything, and I ignored her frantic calls and messages filled with pleas and apologies. I was numb, with nothing left to say. With everything else donated to charity, the only thing she could ask for was the house. I kept it, and eventually sold it, using the money to make a fresh start in a new city. In the end, she was left with nothing. No house, no money, no future with me. I could only imagine how she must have felt when she realized that everything we'd built together had slipped through her fingers, gone to others, people who truly needed it. I had once believed that love was enough to keep us together, but now I knew better. Love wasn't enough when trust was broken, and in the end, it wasn't the assets or the money that mattered. It was the respect, the honor, and the integrity that built a marriage. None of that was there anymore. Months passed, and I started adjusting to my new life. I even began dating again, though I took things slow. My wounds were still too fresh to dive in head first. As for Grace, I never saw her again. Maybe that was the worst part of it all, never getting the closure I wanted, the answers I needed. But at least I had something more important now, my dignity, my peace, and that was something she couldn't take from me. Thank you for watching.